All right, so get ready because today we are uncorking the mystery of terroir.
Ooh, terroir.
You sent over a whole bunch of articles and notes. You clearly want to go beyond just, fruity and oaky
Yeah,
and really grasp how a wine's birthplace shapes its personality.
it's fascinating, isn't it?
I mean, it's more than just a buzzword, right? It's
Yeah.
this whole web of environmental factors,
Mhm.
everything from the obvious, like climate and soil, to things you might not even expect, like the human tradition,
Yeah,
even the tiny critters that are living amongst the vines.
right. Those little guys are important too.
And speaking of the critters, I was surprised to find some details in your research about the role of biodiversity.
Really?
But let's first tackle the big picture climate.
Okay.
You've got notes on everything from macro to microclimates.
Yeah?
So it seems like there's a whole lot more to it than just sunshine and rain.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What do you think?
It's a whole, like you said, a whole web of factors. So
Mm.
you have your big sweeping climate patterns,
Okay.
like latitude and ocean currents.
Right.
Those are your heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Those are the things that make the big differences.
Yeah.
Take the Humboldt Current in Trier, for example.
Okay.
It chills the entire coastline,
Oh, wow.
giving those wines a crispness that you really wouldn't find in, say, like a sun-drenched Napa Valley where the climate is so much warmer.
Right. So that's macroclimate.
Right,
But
exactly.
then you've got these smaller localized pockets
Yeah.
called mesoclimate.
Mesoclimates, yeah.
And you've even got notes on how forests can play a role.
Uh-huh.
I've got to admit that one threw me for a loop.
Yeah, it's all about subtle variations.
Okay.
Mountains can block wind and rain. Valleys can trap cold air. Even forests can impact humidity and temperature swings.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It really is.
So think about your favorite wine regions.
Okay.
They likely have some very unique geographical features that really contribute to their wine's character.
You know what, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm picturing the rolling hills of Tuscany, the steep slopes of the Mosel Valley.
Oh, exactly.
It's all coming together now.
Uh-huh.
And then we zoom in even further to
Yeah.
the microclimate.
Microclimate.
That teeny tiny patch of earth where
Right.
the grapes actually grow.
Yeah, like right where the vine is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you've got a great example of this in your notes.
Oh, really?
You mentioned a particular Pinot Noir from
Uh-huh.
Burgundy that you love.
Yeah.
And how it has these delicate floral notes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out that vineyard is planted on a south-facing slope,
Okay.
which gets maximum sun exposure.
Right.
So that little bit of extra warmth allows those delicate aromas to develop.
So wait, even within a single vineyard, the flavor of the grapes can change based on where they are on the slope.
Totally.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why terroir is so complex.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the soil yet.
Got to talk about the soil.
You've got a ton of notes on different soil types: clay sand, limestone, even volcanic soil,
Right?
which always makes things interesting.
Yeah, that one's a fun one.
Does volcanic soil automatically mean a smoky, earthy wine?
Not necessarily. It's
Uh,
more nuanced than that.
Okay.
But, you mentioned enjoying a Cabernet Sauvignon with distinct notes of graphite.
Mm-hmm.
That could very well be attributed to the gravelly soils that you have a note about,
Right.
similar to those found in the Medoc region of Bordeaux.
Yeah, that's the one. I knew there was something special about that soil type.
Uh-huh.
So how does soil actually impact the flavor of the grapes?
Well-
It's not like the vines are eating dirt, right?
Not directly, no.
Okay.
But the soil's composition,
Right.
its texture drainage and mineral content,
Hmm.
all affect the vine's access to water and nutrients.
Okay.
For instance, clay soils
Yeah.
hold water,
Okay.
which can lead to lush, fruit-forward wines,
Right.
whereas sandy soils drain really quickly,
Yeah.
often resulting in more structured, elegant wines.
Okay.
So it's all about finding that right balance for the grape varietal.
So it's not just about what's in the soil, but also how it affects the vine's growth and development.
That's exactly it,
Fascinating.
isn't it?
And speaking of growth and development, what about the shape of the land itself?
Ooh, topography.
Topography.
Yeah.
To see, you've got a whole section on it.
Topography, or the lay of the land,
Okay.
plays a crucial role in how a vineyard interacts with its environment.
Okay.
Think about it, altitude, slope aspect.
Yeah.
All of these things impact sunlight exposure, temperature fluctuations, even air circulation.
Okay, so picture this. I'm hiking up a mountain.
Okay.
It gets colder, the air thins out.
Uh-huh.
You're telling me those grapes are feeling it too?
They're feeling it.
Okay.
High-altitude vineyards experience more intense sunlight and dramatic temperature swings between day and night.
Oh, wow.
This stresses the vines out, forcing them to work harder
Right.
and ultimately leading to grapes with more concentrated flavors and vibrant acidity.
It's that struggle equals deliciousness theme again.
Exactly.
I'm guessing slope direction matters too.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I always pick the sunny spot on the beach.
Right. Well, The direction a slope faces, known as its aspect,
Mm-hmm.
determines how much sunlight the vines receive.
Right.
South-facing slopes, like the one you mentioned with your favorite Pinot Noir,
Yeah.
get the most direct sunlight, leading to riper, fuller-bodied wines.
Okay.
North-facing slopes are a little cooler,
Right.
resulting in wines with higher acidity and a leaner profile.
All right. So we've covered climate, soil, and topography.
That's a lot.
But something tells me there's even more to this terroir puzzle.
There's always a little more.
What about all the buzzing, crawling, and flying creatures in a vineyard?
Oh yeah, we can't forget about them.
They've got to play a role, too.
Right.
What do we think?
Biodiversity is more than just a trendy term.
Okay.
It's a vital component of terroir.
Right.
It's about recognizing that a healthy vineyard is a vibrant ecosystem
Uh-huh.
where everything is interconnected.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about these tiny players and how they impact my glass of wine.
Well, think of it this way.
Okay.
A diverse mix of plants and insects
Yeah.
helps control pests naturally.
Okay.
This reduces the need for chemical interventions.
Got it.
Beneficial insects prey on harmful ones.
Right.
Birds and bats contribute to pest control as well.
Wow, so it's like nature's own little pest control system.
Exactly. It's a natural balancing act
Yeah.
that keeps the vineyard healthy and thriving.
And a healthy vineyard means healthy grapes, right?
Right.
But how does all this biodiversity actually translate into flavor?
Well, one fascinating aspect
Yeah.
is the role of indigenous yeasts.
Okay.
These are wild yeasts that live naturally on the grapes and in the vineyard environment.
Oh, wow.
Each region has its own unique population of these yeasts,
Mm-hmm.
and they contribute to the complexity and the regional typicity of the wine.
So you're saying that the yeast itself can make a wine taste like it's from a specific place.
It's true.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And you have an example of this in your notes.
Oh, right.
You mention a winemaker in the Jura region of France
Uh-huh.
who ferments their Chardonnay using only indigenous yeasts.
That's right.
They believe it's crucial to capturing the true essence of their terroir,
Absolutely.
those unique flavors that can only come from that particular place.
Yeah, it's like a fingerprint.
I need to try that wine.
You do.
It sounds like a true expression of the land.
It is.
But let's be honest, as fascinating as nature is, it's not the whole story.
It's only part of it.
Humans have a hand in this too, right?
Oh, huge.
All right, so let's talk about the human element of terroir.
Okay.
I'm guessing it starts with the grape variety itself.
Absolutely, you're right.
Okay,
Choosing the right grape for this specific terroir is absolutely crucial.
right.
You can't just plant Cabernet Sauvignon anywhere and expect it to thrive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Some grapes need cool climates, others need scorching sun.
Uh-huh.
Some need well-drained soil, others are more tolerant of clay. It's all about matching the grape to its ideal environment.
Yeah.
And you've even got a note here about a Grenache from Priorat, Spain.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned how it has this amazing intensity and minerality.
It does.
Well, Grenache thrives in hot, dry conditions and shift soils.
Right.
And that's what Priorat has.
Yeah.
So that combination is what gives those wines their unique character.
It's starting to make more sense now.
Good, I'm glad.
So it's like a matchmaking game.
Uh-huh.
Grape meets place.
Right.
Deliciousness ensues.
That's it.
But it's not just about picking the right grape.
No.
I see in my notes there's stuff about pruning,
Yeah.
training the vines, managing the soil.
Uh-huh.
All those choices must impact the wine too.
Absolutely. Every decision a winemaker makes in the vineyard, from vine spacing to pruning techniques, influences the final product.
Really?
Take pruning, for example.
Okay.
The way a vine is pruned affects the number of grapes it produces.
Right.
Fewer grapes often mean more concentrated flavors.
Oh.
This is why you'll often hear wine enthusiasts talk about low yields leading to higher quality wine.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely heard that less is more philosophy before, but I never really understood the why behind it.
That's the why.
So even seemingly small decisions in the vineyard can have a big impact on the final taste.
Oh yeah, huge.
And then there's tradition, right? Generations of winemakers in a specific region must build up an incredible amount of knowledge about what works best in that place.
Absolutely, traditional knowledge is invaluable.
Right.
It's about understanding the nuances of the terroir, knowing when to intervene and when to let nature take its course.
Mm-hmm.
Take Burgundy, for instance.
Okay.
Winemaking there is steeped in tradition, with centuries-old practices passed down through generations.
Wow.
From the meticulous pruning techniques to the use of oak barrels for aging.
Yeah.
Every step is rooted in the region's history and intimate understanding of the land.
So it's not just about following a recipe.
Right.
It's about inheriting a legacy, a deep connection to the place.
Exactly.
And it's not just the technical stuff, right?
It's more than that.
The local culture must play a role too.
Of course.
Like what foods people eat with the wine, how they celebrate, even their views on nature.
Uh-huh.
must shape how they make wine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Culture and terroir are deeply intertwined.
Yeah.
For example, in Georgia,
Uh-huh.
they have a long tradition of making wine in quavery,
I was gonna
which
say.
are these large clay vessels buried underground.
Yes, I was so fascinated by that.
Yeah,
It's like they're fermenting the wine in the heart of the earth itself.
exactly. It's a practice that dates back thousands of years,
Wow.
and it reflects their unique cultural relationship with wine and the land.
So terroir is like this incredible tapestry woven from nature science and human culture,
Yeah,
all coming together to create something unique.
you got it.
And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the one who orchestrates it all.
The winemaker?
The winemaker,
Uh,
the artist, the scientist, the one who takes everything we've talked about,
right.
climate, soil, topography, biodiversity, human tradition,
Uh-huh.
and transforms it into a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
It's where science meets artistry, right?
Exactly. The winemaker is the interpreter of the terroir.
Right.
They make decisions about fermentation, yeast selection, barrel aging,
Uh-huh.
each choice shaping the final expression of the wines.
So some winemakers try to intervene as little as possible,
Right.
letting the terroir speak for itself,
Yeah.
while others are more hands-on.
There's a whole spectrum of approaches.
Okay.
You've got minimal intervention winemaking,
Yeah.
where the goal is to produce wines that are as natural and reflective of the terroir as possible.
Okay.
On the other end of the spectrum, you've got winemakers who utilize modern techniques and technology
Right.
to exert greater control over the winemaking process.
Yeah.
And of course, there are many winemakers who fall somewhere in between,
Right.
using a combination of approaches.
So even with the same grapes from the same vineyard, two winemakers could make completely different wines.
Absolutely, that's the beauty of it. Wow. Winemaking is both a science and an art.
Right.
The winemaker's choices, their philosophy, their interpretation of the terroir,
Uh-huh.
all contribute to the final character of the wine.
That's amazing.
It's like taking the same ingredients and creating a symphony or a jazz solo.
Yeah.
The foundation's the same,
Right.
but the expression is unique.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing the wine world in a whole new light.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Wow.
There's always more to discover, more layers to uncover in this fascinating world of wine.
I'm definitely ready to dive deeper.
Good, me too.
But before we go there, there's one thing I haven't seen much about in my notes.
Okay?
All this talk about terroir and how it shapes wine.
Yeah.
What happens when the terroir itself starts to change? I mean, we hear all this stuff about climate change and its impact on agriculture.
Right.
What do we think?
Well, that's a very important question and one that winemakers around the world are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
As the climate changes, so too will the terroir,
Right.
and ultimately the wines we drink.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns.
Yeah,
That's got to mess with the delicate balance of terroir.
it does, and it's already having a noticeable impact on wine regions around the world.
Really?
Some regions are seeing warmer growing seasons,
Okay.
leading to earlier harvests and changes in grape ripeness.
Oh, wow.
Others are experiencing more extreme weather events,
Right.
like droughts and floods,
Uh-huh.
which can damage vineyards and impact grape quality.
So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for adaptation and innovation.
Right, it forces you to think differently.
So what can winemakers do?
Well,
Is there any way to preserve terroir in the face of these changes?
it's a complex issue,
Yeah.
but there are things that can be done.
Okay.
Some winemakers are experimenting with different grape varieties,
Uh-huh.
seeking out ones that are better suited to the changing conditions.
Okay.
Others are adapting their vineyard practices,
Right.
focusing on water conservation and soil health to make their vines more resilient.
So it's about understanding how the terroir is evolving
Yeah,
and finding ways to work with those changes to continue making great wine.
exactly.
This is fascinating, but I have to admit it's a little bit daunting too.
Yeah, it's a big question.
If the terroir itself is changing,
Yeah,
what does that mean for the future of wine?
that's a question we'll explore further in our next segment.
Okay.
But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the complexity and beauty of terroir.
Right.
It's a reminder that wine is more than just a beverage.
Right.
It's a reflection of the land, the climate, the people, and the history that shaped it.
Yeah.
And as the world changes,
Uh-huh.
so too will the wines we drink.
Right.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery and adaptation.
I love that perspective. It's like we're all part of this ongoing story of terroir.
We are.
Both the winemakers and the people who enjoy their wines.
Uh.
And by understanding terroir better,
Yeah,
we can appreciate the incredible journey that goes into every bottle.
absolutely.
Okay, so we are going to delve into the future of terroir and what it means for the wines that we'll be enjoying
Right.
in the years to come after a short break.
Sounds good.
So before the break, we were talking about how climate change is really impacting terroir.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It kind of makes you wonder what's next for the wines that we love.
Yeah, it's true. There's no denying that there's a shift happening.
Right.
But rather than just viewing it as this threat, I think it's more helpful to look at it as like an evolution.
Okay.
Winemakers are incredibly resourceful, and they're already adapting their practices in the vineyard and in the cellar.
You mentioned experimenting with different grape varieties.
Yeah,
Is that really a viable option? I mean, some grapes are so iconic to certain regions.
right.
Can you really just swap out like a Pinot Noir for something else in Burgundy and expect it to taste the same?
Not necessarily the same,
Right.
but it's more about finding grapes that can thrive in these new conditions
Okay.
and still produce high-quality wine.
Right.
You got a note here about climate-resilient varieties,
Yeah.
grapes that are better suited to drought conditions
Uh-huh.
or fluctuating temperatures.
Okay.
Some winemakers are even experimenting with ancient, almost forgotten varieties
Really?
that were once abandoned but might hold the key to adapting to a changing climate.
Wow. That's like bringing back winemaking history.
It is.
Are there any specific examples of regions where this is happening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a note about southern Italy,
Yeah.
a region already known for its hot, dry climate.
Right.
Winemakers there are exploring heat-tolerant grapes,
Mm-hmm.
like Nero d'Avola and Primitivo,
Okay.
which are proving to be very successful in producing really bold, flavorful wines, even as the temperatures rise.
It makes sense. So if one door closes, another one opens.
Exactly.
New possibilities
Right.
emerge. But what about the winemakers who are committed to those classic grapes?
Yeah.
Are they just kind of out of luck?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Remember, Terroir is this dynamic system.
Right.
Winemakers are constantly learning and adapting.
Yeah.
You have some research here about vineyard management techniques that are aimed at mitigating the effects of climate change.
Right.
For example, some winemakers are experimenting with different trellising systems
Okay.
or canopy management techniques
Uh-huh.
to provide more shade for the grapes.
So they're giving the vines a little sunscreen.
Exactly, helping them stay cool under pressure.
But even if the grapes are adapting, doesn't the actual winemaking process have to change too?
Right, you're right, the changes don't stop at the vineyard.
Yeah.
Winemaking techniques are also evolving to address those challenges of a changing climate.
Okay.
I remember how we talked about those decision points for the winemaker,
Uh-huh.
fermentation, temperature, yeast selection, aging.
Right.
All of those can be adjusted to compensate for changes in the grapes themselves.
Okay, give me an example. How could a winemaker adjust things in the cellar to deal with grapes that are ripening differently because of warmer temperatures?
Sure, let's say a winemaker is working with Cabernet Sauvignon grapes
Okay,
that have reached higher sugar levels because of the hotter growing season.
right.
They might choose to ferment at slightly cooler temperatures
Uh-huh.
to preserve acidity and freshness in the wine,
Okay,
or they might opt for a shorter maceration period.
okay.
That's the time the grape skins are in contact with the juice
Wait,
to avoid extracting too much tannin,
got it.
which can make the wine taste harsh or astringent.
So it's like they're fine-tuning the recipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Adjusting the variables
Yeah.
to create a wine that's still balanced and delicious despite the challenges.
This is making me realize that winemaking is a lot more complex than I ever imagined.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a delicate dance between nature and human intervention.
It is.
But what about me, the wine drinker?
Yeah.
What changes might I see in the wines I'm choosing?
That's a great question.
Thanks.
It's hard to predict exactly how things will unfold,
Right.
but, we can already see some trends emerging.
Okay.
One thing is for sure,
Yeah.
the world of wine is becoming more diverse and exciting than ever before.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, we might see some shifts in those classic regions,
Okay.
known for certain grape varieties.
Uh-huh.
Now, as temperatures warm, some areas might become less suitable for the grapes that traditionally thrive there.
Right.
For example, you have a note about Bordeaux,
Yeah.
which is famous for its Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot blends.
Bordeaux is like the royalty of the wine world.
It is. But as temperatures rise, some experts predict that Bordeaux will have to adapt.
Really?
Some winemakers are already experimenting with planting heat-tolerant varieties,
Uh-huh.
like Grenache or Syrah,
Okay.
which might become more prominent in the blends of the future.
So a Bordeaux might not taste like a classic Bordeaux in a few decades.
It's possible.
That's a bit of a mind bender,
Yeah,
but it's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
not at all.
It just means we need to be open to new interpretations and expressions of those classic regions.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe some regions will change.
Yep.
But you said there's going to be more diversity. Does that mean new wine regions are popping up in unexpected places?
It does.
It's like where?
You already mentioned sparkling wine in England,
Right.
but there are other examples. Think about Denmark or even parts of Scandinavia.
Oh, wow.
Regions that were historically too cold for viticulture are now producing some really intriguing wines.
It's like the wine wrap is expanding before our eyes.
It is.
So for someone like me who loves exploring different wines,
Yeah.
what should I be looking for?
Wow.
Any tips for navigating this brave new world of wine?
First and foremost, be adventurous.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone
Yeah.
and try wines from new regions or unfamiliar grape varieties.
Okay.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Your local wine shop or sommelier.
Yeah.
They could be a great resource for learning about new wines and regions.
You know what? I'm feeling inspired.
Okay.
It's like the world of wine is becoming even more adventurous and exciting.
It is.
But with all these changes happening, is there anything I can do to support winemakers who are committed to sustainable practices
Yeah,
and preserving terroir?
that's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in our final segment.
But for now?
Let's savor this moment of discovery and anticipation.
Okay.
The world of wine is evolving, and who knows what delicious surprises await us in the future.
I can't wait to find out. Okay, so we've explored this fascinating world of terroir,
Yeah,
from its intricate natural elements to the human touch that shapes its expression.
right?
We even went into how this system is evolving as climate change throws some curveballs. But the big question that's lingering in my mind is, where do we fit into all of this?
The wine lovers.
The wine lovers. What
Right.
can we do?
That's a great question, and it highlights a crucial point. The future of terroir isn't just in the hands of winemakers.
Right.
We as consumers have a role to play too.
Okay.
Our choices ultimately drive the market
Right.
and influence which practices are rewarded.
So what can we actually do to make a difference? I mean, I'm just one person sipping my Pinot Grigio
Yeah,
on a Tuesday night. Does my choice really matter that much?
it does. Every bottle you buy
Really?
is a vote for a particular way of making wine.
Okay.
By supporting wineries that prioritize sustainability and terroir integrity.
Uh-huh.
You're sending a message that those values matter.
So how do I know which wineries are walking the walk, so to speak? Are there any, like, telltale signs on the label
Yeah.
or in the marketing materials?
You're in luck. There are a few clues.
Okay.
You can look for certifications like organic or biodynamic.
Okay.
These indicate that the winery is adhering to strict standards
Uh-huh.
that prioritize soil health, biodiversity, minimal intervention.
Okay.
You might see terms like sustainable farming or low intervention winemaking.
Right.
And remember that wine shop we talked about?
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
Okay.
A good wine merchant will point you in the right direction and share the stories behind the wines they carry.
So we don't have to be wine experts to make informed choices.
Not at all.
We just need to be curious
Yeah,
and ask the right questions.
exactly.
What about all this talk about natural wine?
Oh, yeah.
Does that automatically mean it's a better choice for the environment and terroir preservation?
Well, natural wine is definitely having a moment.
Right.
And here's an overlap with the values we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that natural wine isn't really a regulated term.
Okay.
There's no official definition or certification process.
Hmm.
Generally, natural wines are made with minimal intervention using organic grapes and native yeasts
Yeah.
with little to no added sulfites.
Okay.
But without a clear definition, it can be tricky to know exactly what you're getting.
So it's buyer beware with the natural wine trend.
Kind of?
It seems like it's more about understanding the winemaker's philosophy
Yeah.
and practices than just relying on a label.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. Read about the wineries.
Yeah.
Look for information about farming practices and maybe reach out to them directly.
Oh, that's
A
cool.
lot of smaller wineries are really passionate
Yeah.
about what they do.
I bet.
And happy to share their stories.
I love that idea. We can become citizen investigators,
We can.
uncovering the truth behind the bottle.
That's it.
But let's be honest, sometimes all we want is a good bottle of wine
Sure.
without having to do a ton of research.
Right.
Any shortcuts?
One thing to keep in mind is that supporting smaller independent wineries is often a good bet.
Okay.
They tend to have closer ties to the land and are more likely to prioritize sustainable practices.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Also look for wines from lesser-known regions.
Okay.
These areas often have a strong tradition of small-scale, family-run wineries
Mm-hmm.
that are very connected to their terroir.
It's like voting with our wallets for a more sustainable and diverse wine world. Supporting the little guys who are doing things right and maybe even discovering some hidden gems along the way.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about buying the right wine.
It's also about how you drink them.
Oh.
Savor each sip,
Uh.
pay attention to the aromas and flavors, and appreciate the story that each bottle tells.
Right. It's like we're not just consuming a product.
Yeah.
We're engaging in this sensory experience
Yeah,
that connects us to the land, the people, the traditions that went into making that wine.
beautifully put.
This whole conversation has been a revelation. I
Yeah.
feel like I've not only expanded my wine knowledge,
Yeah.
but also gained a deeper appreciation for the entire world of wine.
Uh-huh.
It's more than just a drink.
Right.
It's a reflection of our connection to the earth and to each other.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And the best part is the journey's just beginning.
Right.
As we continue to explore this evolving world of terroir,
Yeah.
we'll undoubtedly encounter new challenges and new discoveries.
I'm excited to see what the future holds for wine.
Me too.
So we encourage you, dear listener, to embark on your own exploration.
Yes.
Seek out those wines that speak to you.
That really resonates.
Yeah, those that capture the essence of a place and time.
Right.
Ask questions.
Be furious.
And savor every sip.
Exactly. And remember, the future of terroir is in our hands.
It is.
Let's raise a glass to a more sustainable, diverse, and delicious wine world for generations to come.
Cheers to that, and thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of terroir.
It's been fun.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep enjoying the wonderful world of wine.